Okay, guys, so if you made it through my first video about decimal tenths, I bet you're really excited to watch my next video about decimal hundredths. So this is your next decimal reference book that you're going to save to your drive. And this presentation is going to walk you through reading decimal amounts that have tenths and hundredths. So these decimal amounts are going to look a little bit more like what you're used to seeing when you look at money amounts. So this is the time when you really want to start thinking about what you already know about reading decimals when they're in the form of money. Hopefully you all have your math notebook there with you and you're taking notes. Write down important information, math words that you hear me using, and draw visual models to help you remember the math concept. Okay, so let's begin. I'm excited. Get excited. What is a decimal? You guys already know a lot about decimals from working with money, and you know that any digits to the right of the decimal point represent a value that's less than one whole. You can write any decimal amount in a fraction. And you know that when you're looking at decimal amounts, the denominator for your fraction is going to be either 10, 100, or 1,000. Or you could go higher than that. You could go higher powers of 10. But in 5th grade, we pretty much work with tenths, hundredths, and thousandths. Okay, here's a visual model that shows you one whole, that's the square, and it's been divided, instead of 10 equal pieces this time, it's been divided into 100 equal pieces. We have 10 columns going up and down, and we have 10 rows going across. Okay? Now, this little square right up here that I'm pointing my mouse at, that represents just 1/100th. So you can see how much smaller that is than a tenth, which is like this whole strip here. All right, now the yellow portion, you can write that in fraction form, 8 out of 100, or 8/100ths, and you can also write it in decimal form. Now, a lot of you guys are going to look at this and you're going to read it 0.08 because that's what people tend to do if they're just trying to quickly say the number. That's technically not mathematically the way we want to do it in 5th grade. In 5th grade, I want you to read this amount 8/100ths. So you're going to read the number name that you see and then say its place value position. Since this 8 is 2 spots away from the decimal point, 1, 2 spots away from the decimal point, it's in the hundredths place, 8/100ths. Okay, now you probably hear me really emphasizing the hundredths part. I'm just trying to really emphasize that because a hundredth is a much smaller portion of one whole, whereas hundreds are, of course, much, much, much bigger. So I'm just trying to help you hear the difference there. Okay, now for place value, of course, we're familiar with ones, tens, and hundreds. And last week we worked with a place value chart that went all the way up to like 10 billions, I think. And then I kept telling you last week, don't worry about the decimal part of this place value chart. Well, now we're starting to work with our less than one whole place value positions. This is my tenths place value position, and this is my hundredths place value position. So if you don't remember, I want to remind you that there's a place value chart posted in your Monday folder for this week. I put it in last week's folders, but I'm also putting it in this week's folders for you again. And I want you to get in the habit of using that place value chart so that you can really, really, really remember and get it in your brain that this spot here is tenths always, and this spot here is hundredths always. Okay, now we can use these visual models to represent mixed numbers just like we did with tenths, and now we can show how to do it with hundredths. So here we have 3 wholes, 1, 2, 3, and here we have 1/10 plus 1/100th, which we would read 11 hundredths. So see this here? 3 and 11 hundredths. You're going to read the number as it's written and then say the place value position of the last digit. All right, so some things are going to stay the same. And now we're going to build on what we learned when we were reading our tenths. Say the whole number part, 593, and always say and for the decimal point. Then read, these instructions say read the fraction part. I'm just going to say read the decimal part. And then say the last decimal place value position. So here our last digit is in the hundredths place. So that's why that's the place value word that I will read after I say 81. So it will be 81 hundredths, 593 and 81 hundredths. And this is what hundredths look like on a number line. So here we have the distance between 0 and 1, just like we had before. That stayed the same. We still have tenths marked, 1/10, 2/10, 3/10, and so on. And now in between each tenth, we've divided each tenth again into 10 equal pieces. So here we have this tenth has been cut into 10 equal pieces, and this tenth has been cut into 10 equal pieces, and so on until we end up with 100 little slices. So you can see this right here, this spot represents 1/100th of my whole. So if I wanted to show, let's see, where were we before? Let's do like 11 hundredths, because I know that was one of our examples, 11 hundredths. I don't remember where I saw it, but 8 hundredths. Okay, let's do 8 hundredths. So 8 hundredths would be right about here. I do have a pen tool. I don't know why I'm not using it. Okay, so here's 8 hundredths, right about there, less than 1/10. Let me write it. Okay, and then if I wanted to show, what's another one that's on here? There's 8 hundredths, 7 hundredths. We could do 35 hundredths here. Forget all this. But let's do 35 hundredths. Here's my 3/10. So I need 3/10 plus 5 hundredths. So it's going to be right here in between the 3/10 and the 4/10. And this is how I would write it. 3/10 plus 5 hundredths makes 35 hundredths. All right, thank you for being so patient watching my videos today, you guys. I'm super proud of your hard work. And I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'm excited to see you in our next live lesson.